The original PlayStation wasn't just a home for classics. It quietly became a playground for creators experimenting with Sony's Net Yaroze toolkit and modern homebrew tools. What came out of that mix wasn't rough sketches or forgotten prototypes, but a surprising lineup of projects that pushed hardware, ideas, and ambition far further than anyone expected. Today, we're exploring 10 standout homebrew games that prove just how inventive PS1 developers could be when given freedom, curiosity, and a console ready for experimentation. Terra Incognita. We are starting off strong with this Net Yaroze landmark that throws you onto a lonely island and simply asks you to push forward. A short intro shows your ship and crew before you step into a small 3D world that feels much bigger than it has any right to on hobbyist hardware. The setting leans on classic fantasy adventuring. Ruins, caves, and tight corridors hide monsters, switches, and simple environmental tricks, so the story is more about your journey through this forgotten place than cutscenes or dialogue. It echoes commercial action RPGs of the era without ever pretending to be one, which is why it's stuck in so many demo disc memories. Gameplay lands firmly in 3 Zelda or Landstalker territory. You swing a weapon, hop across gaps, and shove boxes onto plates to open doors. Short length aside, it shows how far Net Yaroze devs could push camera work, combat, and basic platforming on a standard PlayStation. Hover racing. Following that sense of exploration comes Hover Racing, 1997. Instead of swords and dungeons, this one gives you anti-gravity craft screaming around low polygon tracks. Its world assumes a future where high-speed hovering circuits are normal, but it keeps that idea in the background and lets the visuals sell it. Metallic tunnels, open stretches, and looming walls flash past as you cling to each turn. There is no dense backstory about leagues or conspiracies, just the fantasy of piloting a sleek machine built purely for speed. The presentation lands surprisingly close to early Wipeout-style racing, which is exactly why it is still talked about in Net Yaroze retrospectives. Gameplay is all about fast laps, smooth handling, and learning lines. Lightweight hover physics, simple track layouts, and responsive steering create a clear, readable racer that shows off what a small student-led team could do on Sony's hobby kit. Blitter Boy Operation Monster Mall. Sliding into more chaotic territory. Blitter Boy Operation Monster Mall 1998. Here the premise is straightforward and immediately readable. A bright, cartoonish kid hero sprints through a shopping mall overrun with monsters, and your goal is to rescue babies scattered through the chaos. Instead of building a detailed lore explanation, the game leans on the basic image of a haunted mall full of ghosts and creatures, plus children in danger who need a quick escape. That alone creates enough tension to pull you across each floor as you duck around corners and race toward escape pads. You always understand why you are there. Save the kids, survive the onslaught, clear the level. Gameplay sticks close to arcade shooters. You move around fixed-style screens, blast enemies, and scoop up babies before carrying them to teleport-style exits. Simple controls, tight arenas, and steady enemy waves make this one of the most polished and immediately fun Net Yaroze titles. Super Mansion. This Net Yaro's cult piece channels a very clear influence. You wander a large Western-style mansion in fixed camera views that instantly recall early Resident Evil. The setup is classic horror, a mysterious building, locked doors, and the sense that you are alone inside something old and unsettling. Story is delivered more through space than script. Long corridors, ornate rooms, and dead ends build a feeling that this place has a history you are only glimpsing. There are no obvious monsters stalking you, which makes the silence and emptiness feel even stranger as you poke at doors and examine rooms that seem prepared for people who are no longer there. Gameplay focuses entirely on third-person exploration and item hunting in that survival horror-inspired mold. You map out the mansion, search for keys, and solve environmental puzzles while dealing with tank-style movement and fixed camera angles. The absence of combat turns the homebrew mansion into a slow-burn tension machine that relies on layout, framing, and atmosphere rather than jump scares. Celeste Classic PSX. This modern homebrew takes the original Celeste Classic design and drops it onto real PlayStation hardware while keeping the emotional core intact. You guide a young woman climbing a dangerous mountain, and the journey is framed as a struggle against her own doubts and fears. There are no lengthy cutscenes here, yet every screen of the ascent reinforces that simple story. The higher you go, the more each fall feels like a personal setback rather than just a lost life. The demake's chunky, low-resolution look makes the climb feel like a lost late 90s prototype of a very modern narrative. Gameplay remains sharply focused on tight 2D platforming. Every room is a self-contained challenge built around dashes, momentum, and precise timing. The PS1 port keeps the original level layouts and difficulty intact, while adding authentic hardware quirks like loading, controller feel, and a convincingly retro presentation layer. Fromage. Instead of a scripted plot, this project gives you a lonely, blocky world and lets you decide what happens inside it. Fromage is a Minecraft-inspired sandbox engine for PS1, and its story is implied through what you build and dismantle. You spawn in a procedurally assembled landscape of cubes, hills, and void, then start carving tunnels, stacking walls, and shaping crude structures. The mood comes from the contrast. A primitive 3D world running on a mid-90s console, but inviting the same quiet, reflective play modern sandbox games offer. Any narrative you feel emerges from your own projects and the time you sink into a particular landscape. Gameplay is all about placing and removing blocks in first person. Simple tools let you dig, pillar up, create rooms, and experiment with basic architecture, turning the PS1 into a surprisingly capable creative toy. Magic Castle. This once lost Net Yaro's project spent decades in obscurity before finally appearing online. The premise is simple and instantly familiar. 4 different character classes enter a magical castle filled with monsters, traps, and treasure, climbing floor by floor toward a final showdown. There is only light narrative dressing on screen, but the setting feeds that old-school fantasy feel. Each floor is its own little adventure, with enemies, loot, and hazards that tell you what kind of place this castle is without needing heavy exposition. Knowing it was nearly pitched as a commercial game only adds an extra layer of curiosity to every run. Gameplay is all action RPG and roguelike structure. You pick a class, dive into randomized floors, grab new gear, and unlock magic as you go. Short sessions, procedural layouts, and brisk combat make it feel like a missing late-era PS1 experiment that finally escaped the vault. PETSCOP Restored. Here the narrative weight comes from the original PETSCOP web series. This homebrew reimagines the fictional lost PS1 game as something you can actually play on real hardware. You control a character exploring a seemingly harmless pet collecting game that slowly reveals stranger spaces, hidden areas, and unsettling references to a missing girl and a troubled family. The atmosphere rides on contrast. Cheerful colours and simple shapes at the surface, then cryptic rooms and disturbing implications as you dig deeper. Rather than inventing new lore, the project pulls directly from the video series and adapts many of those beats into playable form. Gameplay falls into slow-paced 3D adventure and puzzle territory. You walk through small areas, examine objects, trigger hidden events, and unlock new sections by following odd rules. It feels like stepping into a creepypasta that suddenly became a real disc. Robot Ron. This arena shooter is a clear Robotron-style homage, which means the story mostly lives in the background idea of one figure against overwhelming robotic swarms. On screen, the plot is really the situation. A lone character dropped into tight rooms as waves of enemies pour in from every side. The tension and implied stakes come from the sheer pressure of trying to survive even a few seconds longer, which fits perfectly with that arcade lineage. You do not get cutscenes or logs, just the raw feeling of being hunted by machines in a tiny battlefield. Gameplay uses twin stick-style controls mapped to the PlayStation pad. One input handles movement, the other handles firing in 8 directions. Enemies spawn constantly, forcing you to circle, dodge, and keep shooting without pause. It is pure score-chasing action that shows NetEuro's developers could nail old-school arcade pacing. Loonies 8192. This multi-platform homebrew puzzle game, ported to PSX alongside many other systems, tells its story entirely through tension on the board. There is no explicit narrative about digital creatures or a failing system. Instead, you stare at a field of coloured blocks and a sweeping line that threatens to erase your careful planning. Each round feels like a little crisis. Do you grab a fast, safe match, or wait a moment longer to engineer something bigger before the sweep passes through? That constant trade-off makes every cleared group feel earned and keeps you locked into the rhythm of the playfield. Gameplay is built around forming 2x2 groups of matching tiles, clearing as many as possible in a single sweep as the line passes across the board. The tiny code footprint and elegant rules show off how much design you can squeeze into a small space, making it a perfect closer for a tour of PlayStation homebrew ingenuity. That wraps our look at 10 PlayStation homebrew projects that kept the system's creative spark alive long after its commercial era. They show a different way developers stretched limited tools into full experiences, whether through horror, racing, platforming, or pure experimentation. These games aren't footnotes. They're glimpses of what the PS1 could do when the rules disappeared. If any of them caught your attention, dive in, try them out, and keep the homebrew scene moving forward.